It's time for KTLO, keeping the learning on.
Notice how we don't even try to do it anymore.
There you go. We don't even try.
Yeah.
We don't even try anymore. Why
Well,
not?
it's very fine when we try. So
we'll put that in post. All that post-production work we're doing on this broadcast.
All right. Well, we are in speaker view and ready to rock and roll. It is a lovely day. We are here with, who are these people and what are they doing on this program? What is today's episode? It's episode 44.
Wowza.
Leaders help others. Episode 44. I was thinking earlier today that we are coming up in just a little while to a year of this program.
it's a double four.
And here are the core four, as we tend to call ourselves: Patty, Greg, Simone, and moi. In Canada, Oregon, in Lille, France, and in South Carolina.
Hey, you topped us. You topped us with the top 25.
I did top you with the top 25. All top 25 HDI thought leaders for 2021. And ain't we swell? And if you want to
really want to come inside these brains,
I think so, Brain. But it's KTLO Learn. We have a new blog up there, by the way. Patty just completed a blog for KTLOlearn.com. Check that out. It's from our last episode, episode 43. And there's our Twitter handles, and we are all on LinkedIn. You can track us down. So here we go. And I'm just going to, as we get started here, I'm going to we have guests. We have guests in the waiting room today. So I'm going to let those folks in and get this party started. And I am going to be the interviewer du jour. We have Daniel Breston coming in. We have Dee Burgoyne coming in. We have Doug Tedder coming in.
Oh, it's a DDD day.
It is a DDD day.
We got a D and a Daniel and Doug.
Got D, Daniel, and Doug. It's triple D.
It's D-Day.
I had shoes that size once. So
Daniel, he's so serious there.
Well, there we are.
Handsome dude. Daniel. Good
One
good
of my
photo.
favorite comments.
So basically what we're talking about today is one of the key points of leadership, which is leaders helping others. And we have come up with somewhat of a structure. We don't like to too heavily structure this. It's a conversation more than anything else, but we have a little bit of a structure. So I'm going to start off. We're going to talk as we usually do. I'm going to interview today the core four. Then we're going to hear from our guests. And before the end of the hour, we'll know everything there is to know. No, we won't know everything there is to know. We never know everything there is to know. So let's start off today by talking with Patty. And Patty, what does it take to recognize others? That's a key point of leadership, right? Is recognizing others. And what does it take to recognize others, and how can we become good at it?
Earlier this week, when we were talking about, what are we going to talk about this week? I did a little digging I was looking for a quote for something else, but I actually found this one and I love it because it says everything in a single sentence. Recognizing isn't at all like seeing. The two often don't even agree. And that's by German novelist Sten Nadolny. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I don't know if any of you've seen the movie Amazon. Have you? They use the expression at the end of the movie Amazon. You kind of get an understanding of what they're talking about, because all throughout they've been saying, I see you. And then all of a sudden you understand what it means. And it doesn't mean from the perception of my own bias, but it's who they are and the value they bring to everything they do. And that I think is the piece of the recognition that really strikes it for me. I'm not seeing what I want. I'm seeing who you are and how we can work together and make it work. And then when you see the gifts they deliver, it's a lot easier to daily, simply, authentically be able to recognize things that they do. And the grand gestures, while very nice, oh wow, at the end of the year you got a bonus, or you know, I bought you a trinket that I'm allowed to under the tax limit that I have. While nice, the grand gesture actually doesn't build trust. The grand gesture says, I need to do something to tell you I need to keep you. But it doesn't actually, throughout the time, cumulatively offer them the opportunity to understand, hey, Jane, this is really good. And it's good because of this. I really like the way you did X, Y, Z. It's like compound interest, right? It collects. And they get to better understand your expectations when you tell them what you like and say, hey, here's where we could grow. Are you open to that? And their willingness actually increases if you as a leader are capable of doing that. The one thing, though, I really, really want to talk about is that you have to be genuine about it. Nobody likes false praise, right? It's what I like to call the flummery of the sycophant. It just reeks of needy, and that's what destroys trust. So for me, recognizing is about truly being genuine in recognizing and seeing the value they bring. And that cumulative effect builds trust between both of you, because you have to have the willingness also to recognize how to say, this was great. Could we bump this up or step this up? That's my shtick on recognizing.
Roy's on mute.
And so, Greg, picking it up from where Patty left off, do we recognize people, but to put it directly, why don't we do that more? What do you think holds people back from recognizing others?
Yeah, you'd think with that lovely dissertation on why it's important or why it is needed in organizations, it's surprising then that we're still talking about this. This should just be part of our culture, especially in leadership realms. And so I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that leaders, managers, people in positions of authority, they're people too. And I think that we're in a lot of ways we struggle with the whole, the finite pie, so if I hand you some praise, well, then there's less praise to go around, including for me. And so if you're predisposed to think that there's a limited amount of recognition or whatnot, is you might be less inclined to give it away freely. And I think along with that is the idea that, like, if I shine a spotlight on somebody else, then I'm left here in the shadows, and that kind of maybe that's a little bit difficult. But if you think back in your life, if you think about somebody who's had a positive, in fact, do that right now. Close your eyes, think about somebody, put a name on it that's influenced you in your life, and I want to ask you, what is it that you remember about them? And chances are really good. I did this before I thought that this would be a good thing for us to talk about. Chances are good you don't remember them. You remember how they made you feel. You remember that they put the spotlight on you, and it really wasn't about them at all. And I think that's successful leaders are influential because they don't make it about themselves. They don't make it about being stingy with a finite resource where I have to hold enough to myself to make sure that I get some also, that they freely give to others and recognize others. So I think all of us, leaders included, are flawed human beings that are just trying to do the right thing. But I think some of that finite resource, or elevating you will lower me, that is flawed thinking that I think permeates a lot of what we do. I think you're muted again, Roy.
We're 2 for 2.
We're 2 for 2.
I silenced
Awesome.
him. I stunned him into silence.
I am in stunned silence.
Yeah.
The mute is only on when I want to say something. It's never on when I'm like bumbling in the background. It's amazing how that works.
It is.
I think it's a feature of Zoom. So we talked about recognition, recognizing, and I think that's one of the elements, certainly a big element. And in the beginning, when we discussed this earlier in the week, we talked about 3 different things. We talked about recognizing, amplifying. So you recognize someone, you amplify them, you lift them up that way, and then acting on that. So we have those are the stages that we talk about. So, Simone, what else underlies the stages of recognizing and amplifying people?
Well, you know, Patty and Greg have already mentioned something very dear to my heart, which is actually the way we see someone. So I think one of the very first things that has to permeate every stage, it's not just the beginning of the conversation, it has to be throughout all those stages. And look, there's 1,000 different ways to say hello. Culturally, I've mentioned it before, things like South Africa, we say Sawubona, so I see you, and it goes beyond just, okay, I physically see you here. It's a way of saying I respect and acknowledge you for who you are. But one of the pieces that's also missing, I think, as a leader from those stages, if you're not engaging this, is garnering a response from them in regards to that, because you really want them to be if you're doing this the right way, if we're seeing them the right way and recognizing and amplifying that the right way, the response is, I am here. And I think we've got to make sure that there is that communication is always a two-way. It's never just broadcasting. So recognizing and amplifying can sometimes just be seen as broadcasting, and that's a mistake. When what we're really wanting is that response from them to say, yes, I'm here. Because when we've recognized and amplified, when they're ready and want to make that next step, be it in their career, be it in that particular role, be it in some form of learning that they've got in mind or what they want to do, we need to be their shoulders then from that point. But we can't do that until they've engaged and want to be here with you because you've seen me. And then I think the final underlying stage is, as a leader, being able to look back on for our own learning as well. How have we made that difference as a leader to that individual or to that team for them to be making a difference? See, when I think about recognizing, amplifying people and being able to lift them up, is, well, we're growing people here. We're sending them out into the big wide world after they've been with us. What is that impact we've made on them that helps them make a difference?
Yeah, that's key, right? Is that they have to understand where this is coming from and participate in their own uplift. If I can say that, that's kind of an interesting perspective that a lot of times we don't think about very much. So, Patty, stage 2, amplify. Can you talk a little bit about that? And are you saying we should turn up the volume on everyone, or how does that work? What do we mean by amplify?
Well, amplify, when I think of the word, I think of turn up the volume, right? And turning up the volume for me is, how do I show the world that this person who's working for me or with me is really doing some fantastic things? But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to turn up the volume on everyone. I mean, let's not pretend that everybody has earned that, right? And as a leader, it's not your job either to do the heavy lifting. You're here for a number of reasons, and those reasons are to guide and lead and make sure everything's functioning well. We're layering recognize, amplify, and act on top of the duty and the job that you have. So you want the people to have the kind of qualities where they are willing to share. They don't care who gets credit. If that's a person who's working, they become invisible. And you have to, when Simone talks about seeing, we need to look at who are the people who are really doing the good work and aren't trying to walk into the stage, step up as the genius or the hero. We want enthusiastic, collaborative, cooperative people. It's not a hero zone, right? And they're willing to do the work. So we amplify people who are willing to do the work or future work for themselves in their career. It's not our responsibility to take their career where it goes, but like Simone says, it's our it makes a difference if we can actually step into a role where we help them get there. We're their guide, right? And we want them also, though, to be the kind of person who's accountable for their commitments and open to being challenged and nudged. And nudged is a big one because we can't just, when I talk about flummery, we can't just constantly praise people and expect it to go anywhere if we're not also asking them to be accountable for their commitments. I read an article this week, and I think I shared it on Twitter. Adam Grant said some of the research they did is really interesting. They have what he calls organizations filled with donors, takers, and balancers. And the research that they did had donors at the bottom, people who just give and give and give and give and give, but haven't necessarily learned how to be accountable for their careers to get ahead. And then there are takers and balancers, and we know who the takers are. We've all worked with them, and they never leave us feeling, like Greg said, they don't leave us feeling good when we've worked with them. And the balancers are the people who kind of better understand how to get through managing both giving and taking, and they do it well. But the interesting thing he said is balancers rarely move to the top. They kind of sit in the middle and make it work for everyone. Donors and takers rise to the top. And often in some organizations, if we're not culturally aware, the takers take over. And so that was an interesting article, but he said in healthy organizations, the donors actually take over. And that's who I want to aspire to be as a leader, is somebody who is a donor, who gives, who helps people make their way through. And I think if we're going to amplify others, we need to also make sure that the others are doing the work, that they are worth amplifying. We don't want to just push people up the ladder who haven't done the work or aren't capable of the weight of what up the ladder looks like.
I think some of what you talked about there it falls in line with Bob Berg's Go Giver idea, right?
Great books. Yeah.
And of course, Bob does talk a lot about that constantly giving, and that's what starts to bring it back to you as well. So Greg, you think that corporate culture as we know it or have experienced it in our careers, does that make it harder to amplify people and recognize them, or do you think it's easier? What do you think?
I definitely think it's harder. Patty kind of hinted at some of that in different corporate cultures, there are personality types or ways of conducting oneself that generate more rewards. And frequently, I mean, we all recognize this. Frequently, we're baffled by the personality or the ethics or behaviors of those that make it to the top of the stack. Why is that? Well, there's a reason for it. Cultures, systems create exactly what it is. But that's an easy answer. And I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction, because this is something I'm really, really passionate about. Look, if it were easy, if you're a leader and behave in these ways simply because, well, the culture supports it and that's the easy thing to do, then I don't believe that you're truly, truly exhibiting what I think of as leadership. Leaders do what they do because it's who they are. There's an authenticity, there's a genuineness to leadership. And that means you're going to do what you believe are the right things, whether the culture makes it easy for you to do that or not. And if you go back to the example that I was that I was trying to get to just a minute ago, is those leaders in my life, those that influenced me, they didn't do what I experienced them doing in helping me along because the culture did it. They did it because it's who they are. And I remember them. I remember their words. I remember their tone of voice 20, 25 years later, because they made that significant a contribution, because it's who they are. So I believe, and I talk a lot about digital leadership, because I really feel like organizations require a different kind of leadership now. They are more concerned about lifting others up and elevating others, and they don't do it to make themselves look good or to feed their ego or to have somebody go to the retirement and say, my gosh, it wasn't he or she a really great individual. They do it simply because it's the right thing to do. And it's very rare. And it's increasingly needed in the working from home, working in remote locations, working across cultural boundaries, organizational boundaries, in new ways with people that we don't necessarily share a coffee pot with. Is it requires a tremendously new level of leadership, and you're not going to get there accidentally. It's something that you invest and grow and develop in yourself and in your organization.
What are some ways you can do that?
I think, well, I think that you start authentically. Okay, I'm just repeating what I just said, but that's not, my point is slightly differently. Is if you have an inclination to say, "Wow, that's really cool what you did there," say that. Just say it. Don't say, I wonder what'll happen if I recognize, just say it. Be an authentic person. Learn to be on the lookout for things that you think are really, really good. And the other thing is we've got to, and this gets outside of organizational leadership and into, industry or leading in the world. And that is, you got to get out of your own mind space. You've got to stop looking in the mirror and saying, what can I do today to make this guy the best guy in the planet? You've got to get out of that space. And ironically, when you're fixated on elevating yourself and not others, you actually get less of what you really want. It's the most bizarre thing. If you take the emphasis off yourself and look around and see that, like right here, like I'm looking at these faces, and these are some of the most powerful people in the industry, and every single one of them is sitting here looking at me now. It's like, what a privilege to hang with you people. And it's like, it's just taking the focus off of oneself and looking around you and seeing the fantastic work that people are doing, and seeing the creativity and the ingenuity and the boldness with which we're solving new problems that didn't exist before, and taking the time to just look around. That's my day, guys. I'm going on mute from here on out, because it's like just recognizing that there's a whole different paradigm out there, and that most of us have missed it for so long. And when you take the time to just look around, that's when things are going to happen.
See, here's how I enable this whole thing to happen. You mentioned that people have to be creative and solve problems that didn't exist before. My job is to create the problems that haven't existed before, and then you get to shine by solving them. That's my job. It's just bring. Well, I'm going to switch over here to the gallery view, and we're going to introduce some of the folks who are with us today, and look at them all. Look at we're just crowded with people today. We've got Dee Burgoyne is with us. We've got Kathy Velboom, who's here just about every week. Kathy, it's amazing. You are our Uber guest. And Daniel Breston, who remains in the same exact position, looking at the camera constantly. I don't know how he holds that position like that for so long, but he's there. He's really
He's an
there.
expert mime.
He is.
It's all that executive training. He can sit around a board table for hours, and he just looks like that, just like.
Yeah, never play poker with this guy.
I guess not.
And he's turned his video off because he has a poor internet connection right now. So he's going to get back on me for saying that.
Well, let's give his internet connection a little bit of money to get it, because it's poor.
Yes.
Help the poor. Help the poor. So, Dee, you've been listening in, and I've watched you a little bit, reacting to some of the things that are being said. What do you think?
I love this subject, and part of the reason is that I've worked in HR, as some of you know, for decades, and I can't tell you the number of times that not only on the job description or the what you're supposed to accomplish, but basically recognition and reward and awards is HR's job. And that is so contradictory to what really needs to happen, because reward and recognition of the individual that we've been talking about is as individual for that individual as it is for the individual that's rewarding them. If you're trying to, if I'm trying to reward one of your employees, one of my employees, the way you reward your employees, it doesn't work. It has to come from who you are. And I loved the quote, and I wrote it down, I'm going to steal it, Greg. Leaders do what they do because of who they are. And there are some very successful leaders who are able to really rally people and engage people because they are who they are. But when I wrote the rest of the quote, which was, you have to look at the culture, many cultures are afraid of leaders who do what they do because of who they are. They want that leader to do what HR has said is the way we recognize people, or what the thing is. I have a couple of things in mind. I working at Spiegel for about a decade, which was huge call centers at the time. We used to have those annual awards dinners where you hand out a certificate that shows how many years you've worked there. And when I first got there, and this is something for people to look at for their to-do list, when you see a person who's recognized for working somewhere 10 years, and she is the employee of the year, according to, it used to be like attendance and call, average handle time and those kind of things. When you watch her walk out of the room and rip up her certificate and put it in the garbage, you have to ask yourself, even if someone doesn't do it that blatantly, why would someone do that? What they're saying is, you're handing me this tonight, but it's going to be business as usual when I go back on the floor tomorrow. It's absolutely true that real leaders, genuine leaders, are always shining the spotlight on someone else. But it has to be in a good way. It seems like some leaders are able to shine a spotlight on someone and make them the center of attention when it's something bad, but they don't so often do it like in the moment, like one of you said, as you're walking by, really genuine. And they're simple things, same things like, I know we do this in customer service training when we get that person on the phone or get them on the line, like a chat I had the other night with GoDaddy. The first thing he did was what? Use my name. So it's really important as leaders, the first thing you do, and this is one of those simple things that you do, is use their name. Hi, Dee. How does it feel when the CEO, if I'm passing them in the hallway, says, hi, Dee, how are you this morning? Gosh, Aruni, that was really cool. You knew my name. Just make sure you really know their name, because it's really bad if you don't. And treat each person differently. Don't have the same reward and the same card for each person. Do it differently. That transfers to the whole issue that's really a hot thing right now. And people make it way too complicated about working with a diverse workforce and making it inclusive. Inclusive means you see the individual and you treat the individual individually. There was a movie that was like very computer graphic-y. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a few years back. They used the word similar to what you were saying, Simone, intimacy. And they defined the word intimacy as into me see. They talked about that. So we have to develop as leaders a way to be intimate by being able to see people. That's what people want. If you're reacting to me, but I don't even think you see me, how much does your reaction count? It just doesn't. It comes in, lastly, recognition and even reward comes in moments. And it builds a reputation and there's like a relationship with recognition. There's a recognition relationship. So it happens in moments. You can't do things nicely for a long period of time and do all the right things, and then walk by someone in the hallway when you're the only two people and you're their boss and you don't even look them in the eye. That destroys, it's those moments. It's like the game of chutes and ladders, I realized recently. You go up you go around the board, and sometimes you get a little break and you go up the ladder a bit. You can get all the way to the top of the chutes and ladders, just about to win, and you can do one silly thing and you just go right down the chute, if you remember the game, all the way to the back. That's leadership. You claw your way, you build your way, you build your reputation, and people clamor to work with you if you are a great leader who grows people, and with whom people that go into your section, like at Spiegel, there was one leader who always had people lined up to go into her section, because she had a very unique style. She always was successful in employees in her section who wanted to move up to supervisor or trainer or whatever it was. People clamored because the people that worked for her got ahead, and there was a reason for that. She built them. She was constantly talking about them and promoting them. And it's a fun thing. It's an individual thing, but as you've said, you have to be yourself, and it is in the moment every day.
So Simone has been itching to talk a little bit about, to follow up with Dee, and then Kathy, I'm going to come over to you after Simone. Simone?
Well, Dee, a woman after my own heart, because I've got my HR wizardry in the background there that I work with too. So the whole recognition reward programs, and I've lost count how many times I've gone in and we've had to rejig them. And people forget that these programs that are in place to help lift people up are living dynamic things. They should never actually be a static thing. They're not meant to be a one-off gimmick to, let's just do this and fix this. Our individual desire to be recognized, have that affirmation. It's not about being put in the spotlight. We just feel that we need our affirmation that we are of value, especially when we're trying to develop that momentary thing, like walking down the hallway, or the quiet amplification is what I like to call it, because you don't necessarily have to be in the Hollywood lights. Is really goes back to being included and being seen. So I think it touches on what we talked about in psychological safety last week, in those stages, that you need to recognize inclusion and learner safety within whatever programs or how you're going to go about doing it, so that people can feel safe actually contributing even to their own development.
Absolutely.
And so leaders really do have to rethink the way that they are adding value or applying whatever recognition programs may be in place. Take advantage of them, absolutely, but you need to make them unique. Outside of any programs that might exist in place, more often than not, what I really find is that helping others is about finding what exists within them and giving them that courage and sometimes the skill and guidance to do it.
And I was just going to say, Simone, that some of that went back to what we talked about last time, which is having those bubbles of safety.
Yeah.
In which allowing people to be self-aware and contribute authentically to the organization as well. So Kathy, you said you have a little different perspective on some of this.
Yeah, I'm going to start with this morning. I was listening to the radios. I had to run out, and a psychologist was talking about, right now with parents being with their children all the time at home and so on. They were talking about building resilient children is what the topic was. But one of the things that he said was that we are hardwired to find fault rather than to find the good. Mm-hmm. And so I quickly popped out and, good old Google, typed that in. And boy, oh boy, BBC, Fortune, Harvard Review, it just, the NCBI, all these places just popped up with it and validated what he had stated. And so if you take that as the beginning, and that goes back actually to evolution, you know, we were put here to survive. Okay. And we all, as our ancestry, we've all evolved into different survival, still survival skills. And it also goes to how you were brought up. How did you come into this world with your ego as an infant, you know, which you don't really have an ego? And how does that grow and develop? And part of that grows and develops by your parents. Were your parents supportive? Did they give you freedom to make decisions? Did they bash your decisions? Did they criticize you and not give you any praise for the things that you had done well, your achievements? And that can leave employees who come into your team, they're all at various levels of comfort, self-confidence, and all these things as they come into the team. The other thing that I want to mention here, I was hardwired to find the good in people. People have called me Pollyannish, and now I'm proud of it. I used to take it as a criticism. I had 3 very important people in my life that pass away just boom, 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 like month. And that moment taught me to not wait to tell people that I appreciate them, that I love them, that thank you so much for doing that for me. It really shifted my mindset into the finding the good in people. And sometimes that annoys people when they're complaining about someone. But so if you bring that into your team, you know, and we're the someone who wants to make them feel better, but we are also by giving this recognition, we are making them feel safe, which goes back to our psychological safety. It makes them feel a sense of belonging. And that goes back to our basic needs as a human, that sense of belonging. And so this is one that if leaders don't have it, it's going to take some unique rewiring, not just training and coaching, but, you know, rewiring yourself to come into the day that way, to show up and be present in that manner. And it goes, you know, from all the things that you all have said, which is to, you know, at the time, say what's in your head when it's good. If you've got some feedback, save that for a time when you can sit down and the person is feeling safe, not just caught off guard in the hallway and you bash them as they're on their way to go fill their coffee or something like that. But as you build these people up with all of these things, they get that confidence then to try something they haven't tried before because they feel safe. They've started to feel that trust in you. They know that you have their back. And so they're going to go out. And that also then is part of what builds the culture and builds that culture of that cohesive team. And I have a philosophy called row the boat. You all stick your rows in equal and you all row the boat together. So everyone now is this cohesive team and taking the safe risks, you know, don't going wild, or what do they call them, cowboys or whatever, but evolving and growing because you've done it in an authentic way because you are that person. Because if you aren't that person, it is really hard to fake it day after day after day, and the team is going to know it.
Absolutely.
And with that, I will pass. That was a ramble.
Yeah,
Oh,
Patty's
no.
ready to jump in, but I just want to point one thing out here is behind me. We have a couple of books here on the shelves, and I really like to do this. This is Dee's book,
Thank you.
and this is Greg's book. We have 2 authors here
Thank you.
Thank you.
and
Compassion.
some others soon to be authors. So this is always a good thing to share our thoughts with other people and share our knowledge. So Patty, you're itching to jump in on.
I'm really itching to jump in because as you were talking, Kathy, and kind of building up on what everybody else has said, I've been taking copious amounts of notes. And the words that are popping out are genuine. Genuine is a word that means I am being a kind me, being genuine in what I give. And D, that really is a piece of how we have to think about ourselves as leaders and how we act. And the only way that we can act genuine and kind is if we're doing it everywhere. We need to do it outside of our organizations and inside, which brings up the word we've mentioned in episode after episode, intention. So taking your intention forward. And right now we're in what people like to call, the word I hate, unprecedented, but we are in times that have shifted and changed, so that we need to, as leaders, all of us, shift and change ourselves and our approach and what we're doing. And it's easy, it's lazy if attendance equals performance. If they're showing up at the building, and that's easy, you know they're there, so you just assume they're working. There's a lot of leaders who are uncomfortable with, I don't know what to do now. Like, what do I do? And a couple of things that they can think about are focusing on performance equals deliverables. What do I need from you? Here are my expectations. I'm going to be really clear on those expectations, because I have to be more clear, because we're not in a boardroom together on a whiteboard. But I can use some of the tools out there to try and get us together to try and mimic some of that. There are tools that whiteboard. There are tools where we can, don't just stack a Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call. We have families with lives and children and extra work that they are trying to do in their homes to accommodate school and all of those pieces. So I think as a leader, and my team always knew this, we've been remote for 12 years, but it's always been, I don't care if you're wearing your pajamas. I don't care when you do your work. The only thing I care about is we have an agreed to time that's going to work for everyone, where we touch base and we make sure we're touching base. But let's talk about that, not dictate it. And then I came to, as you were talking, I remembered a book I read years ago that helped me build a mentorship program. And it was Steve Farber's Greater Than Yourself. And if you are wanting to learn how to practice being someone who lifts and amplifies someone else, that being greater than yourself means that I'm going to take the knowledge I have and what I can do for this team to help get them to a place where they can literally surpass me. And that's my feather in my cap, because I have done so. The really cool things that I learned as we were building that mentorship program is addressing the fears of leaders. But if I get too close, I might feel like they're psychologists. I don't want to hear that stuff. Or what if I learn something I don't want to know? And I think really setting the boundaries of what it looks like, right? You're a navigator, not a task manager. You head them in the right direction, but these people are adults. You're a sounding board, not a therapist. So you can hear, but you don't own it, right? You're not there to solve their life's problems. You're there to take a look at it and see how it will impact your ability to support them in the organization. You're a confidant, not a gossip zone. So anything that your people tell you intentionally, you keep to yourself. That isn't something you take up the rung so that other people can misunderstand or misconstrue it. And you're a champion. You're not their networking tool. You're not the person there to step on to get further. You are their champion that lets other people know about their contributions and their values. So when we talk about seeing you, it's also being genuinely yourself, like Dee says, and stepping into a mindset where you recognize the ability to co-collaborate and not just collaborate, but really find that mission together and be able to chase that mission as people on the same quest who are to support each other. If you look at it that way, it changes the story a little bit. There, that was my little passionate.
There you go. There you go. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our own experiences here. And Simone, what are some of yours, both in being support for other people and in being supported by leaders that you've worked with?
Yeah, I think as a leader, it's always good to look back on how it happened for you, because that is our first experience and the feelings that come with that. And so quite a number of years ago, I had I guess my heroes in the field, and the people that you look to and think, wow, you watch them up on stage and expressing their knowledge and that kind of thing. And you go, wow, I want to be able to do that or be like that. And where can I get all this knowledge? I wish it was like Vulcan mind meld. I just really want to be able to just, can I have some of that? And in a way it becomes addictive. And I wrote an article a long time ago about being illuminated by brilliance. And what happened with this this particular person, who I am good friends with now and admire, and I had no idea this was happening. They invited me to be part of a regular podcast, kind of like what we're doing now, and you know, a decade or so later. But this very first time, and I'm going, whoa, hang on, that's really scary. You actually want me to be on air with you? I said, okay, as the guest thing, I was thinking. She said, no, as part of the crew. And that completely mind boggled me first, but it was the way in which she went about that and encouraging me that I have the knowledge, that I have the wherewithal, and that what I have to say might actually make a difference. And to encourage someone like that and lift someone up that and bring them along with you and show them how it's done, I think that's really critical. We've got to give people the ability to do it. So even, I mean, that's only one of a number of experiences I've had in being supported and lifted into a new realm that I never even thought was going to be possible for myself. I think from the other side of it, in lifting other people up, has been, I've always told my teams, I care about you. I guess that comes from being in complementary health anyway, and having worked in clinics. So you sort of, yeah, I care about people and I care about what happens to them. And I used to tell them this, and I said, you know, because I like doing that, but I'm not going to lie about this. And Greg, you're going to like this, because as a leader in this, as a manager in this position, I'm actually selfish by doing this, by caring about you, because you know what, I've got a job to do as well. And I know that a happier, healthier team actually makes a difference to how my role is contributing to the organization as well. So we can't lie about the fact, just because you know, we can be caring and amplify, but that doesn't mean we on the other side of the relationship don't get anything out of it either, because it also satisfies something within us, both personally and professionally, while we're going about doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's the irony of that. If you don't do it selflessly, then you're not successful. And if you do it selflessly, there is a mutual benefit. I used to have a boss that I consider the best boss that I ever worked for. And when I was kind of near her, but not directly reporting into her, I observed what I described to her as a field of energy around her, that just good things just happened in her presence, which made her a good leader. But when she asked me to come and actually work for her as her operations manager, I said, because I wasn't really looking for the job, I said, yes, but here's my terms. I want to be mentored by you. I want to be mentored for the next level of leadership. And she said, sure. And so she actually kind of pulled me into the inner circle. And what I learned was how hard and tirelessly she worked behind the scenes to make it look easy, to facilitate good outcomes for other people. And if one was ready, willing, and able to do the hard work, you benefited from her energy field. If you didn't, well, it just kind of passed over you.
Well, that's why I think we have to show them the how. And whether that means we give them the opportunity to shadow us, or maybe shadow others in the organization, but the opportunities come from different ways. Sometimes it might be, oh, why don't you present the next team meeting? And people are like, oh, I don't know how to go, they're a bit nervous about it. So what you actually do is you provide these opportunities, these learning moments where they can learn to stand in their own space and realize that, oh, phew, that's over. Oh, I did it. And then, keep lifting them into these different areas and providing those opportunities. They can be the smallest opportunity and yet make the most massive difference to their courage and their wanting to become.
Good point. So, Simone, to continue, what would you like leaders to be thinking about with regard to lifting other people up? And I think we'll do a round robin with that one. What should they be thinking about?
Well, it's been mentioned a couple of times. Be aware of your own intent. You need to ask yourself, why are you lifting this person up? What is the reason you're wanting to do this? Are you training future leaders in your company or the industry, or you just really like this particular person, or they're going to make a difference? Understand what is your intent and your reason for wanting to lift them up in the first place. I think that's important. Meaningful gestures of gratitude. And your intentions also need to be specific. And they're not always, when we talk about amplification, I love Patty's thing, you turn up the volume. Not everybody's made for being in the spotlight or wants you to amplify it over the loudspeaker, over the factory floor, So when we amplify, something else to think about is it's not always about shouting about it or having a Hollywood award party. It's really amplifying how they feel about themselves in a quiet yet powerful way. So for me, really, that final thing to really be thinking about is because it always starts with being human.
As opposed to being pterodactyl? Is that it?
A machine, AI, the other things that...
I just thought pterodactyl was a go-to.
Yeah.
I've known the odd robotic leader.
The robotic leader. Exactly.
I've seen leaders who are pterodactyls.
Yeah, really sharp, pointy teeth and claws, right?
There are leaders who are terror jactyls.
Yeah.
Great for ripping out the underbelly, aren't they, Patty?
Don't get me started on that.
So, Patty, what do you think about that? What are some of the ways that leaders should be thinking about all of this? How do they lift each other up and lift others up?
How about this quote? I'm a quote junkie. If the entire world sought to make itself worthy of happiness rather than make itself happy, then the entire world would be happy. That's by Chris Jami in his book, Venus in Arms. I think that it's really important that we recognize that as a leader, you're on a growth path. You're not stagnant. You have to take the time to understand the things that you are going to use to leverage to grow. And often as leaders, we function through our day and we don't have someone else to say, hey, I just noticed this, or someone to talk it through with. So I would recommend really getting into some mindfulness activities as a leader yourself, and then get a coach. Look at leadership training, because until we're able to get outside of ourselves, we often just don't see ourselves. And if we look at it in terms of making yourself worthy of being a leader instead of craving the leadership title, then the possibility that you become a better leader will present itself through action. So what is character? Jim Rohn says, character is a quality that embodies many important traits, such as integrity, courage, perseverance, confidence, and wisdom. But unlike your fingerprints that you are born with, you can change your character. You have the power to create within yourself and must take responsibility for your own changing. So if you want to be a good leader, having a learning mindset about how to recognize, amplify, and act toward being there for the people that you want to help support.
Thank you, Patty. I'm just gonna continue around the horn here. So, Kathy, I'm coming to you. What do you have some thoughts about how leaders go about this?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm gonna, tag team on a little bit of what's previously been said, which is you have to know who you are. First of all, you need to be very honest and true to yourself. And that means the good stuff and the bad stuff. And then you have to decide who you aspire to be. And that goes back to, I think Patty said, seeing someone on stage and you say, or maybe it was Simone, I want to, wow, I'm just so inspired. This person really speaks to me. I want to be like that. So if you're finding what you want to be, then you need to do and start doing what it needs to take to get there. And again, I'm going to say not everybody's born to be a leader. Leader is not the title. They're two absolutely separate things. I can be a leader without a title. And we've seen that within organizations. People who are the one that's, I think of like sometimes my level 3 engineers, and they are that person that people just look up to, idolize, sometimes more than the boss. And so the thing is if you want to be a leader, do what it takes to become a good leader, or find a different path. And the other thing I wanted to say too is knowing what makes people tick and knowing the past that your team comes into this organization with, because that is a big part in determining what it's going to take to inspire and lift up each person.
Thank you. Yeah, good. That's a good point. Is know where other people are coming from, because sometimes it's some totally different space from what you're used to, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Dee, you are nodding. You're agreeing with Kathy. What do you have to add?
I'm thinking about my special education background. That's what my degree is in. And in special education, it's different than a regular classroom, because instead of standing in the front of the room and quote, leading, if you see the person as the leading, with a master plan and a plan for training and educating people all in the same way, in special education, you have a few less students, but each student has an IEP, an individual education plan, so that you have assessed that student, you've designed something that meets their gaps, basically, as Rocky would say, and that will move them forward and complete those gaps. So being a leader is, it's a very individual sport. It's not the same for everybody. I like what Kathy said about some people are informal leaders. You can see it if you're in a staff meeting with people and the person who's in charge in the front of the room says something, but everybody in the room turns and looks at that person like this to see how are we supposed to react to this. I've seen that a lot in sharing news about HR or benefits or whatever. I share something I think is fantastic, but there's a quiet and then everybody looks at that person. So if you're a leader and you turn around and no one's following you, you're not a leader. I think that there are 3 qualities, or maybe you could call them skills, that every leader needs. If you filter them, all the qualities and things that you hear about all the time. So it's a 3-legged stool. A 4-legged stool could stand, but that's extra. You can't stand a 2-legged stool. So it's 3. And those 3 things are integrity, courage, and compassion. All of the other qualities that you hear about, I believe, fall into one of those. And compassion is about connection. And that's what we've been talking about the whole time, is connecting with people in a way that recognizes and rewards them And not only knowing yourself, but knowing them, because everybody doesn't feel recognition in the same way. Some people want that certificate. They wait all year long. So if you get rid of that program, they're upset. So you have to keep the programs going consistently, but you have to realize that everybody's rewarded in a different way. Just like going back to the special ed students, everybody's an individual.
Daniel just confide to the world that Daniel just said in the chat, middle leaders are the real leaders. Currently reading a fascinating book called The Captain Class. It's by a gentleman named Sam Walker, who did an incredible amount of research, and it's specifically with regard to sports teams. So it's not applicable to everything, but one of the things that he discovered through this research is that it's not necessarily the manager or the coach that produces these incredible sports teams, and the criteria are just unbelievable. The amount of research that went into this, it's some person on the team that is usually doesn't have that title, or sometimes his peers choose that person as the captain of the team, that is central to the success of these incredible teams. So it's a rather fascinating approach. So I was glad somebody put me on to reading that. Greg, I'm coming back to you. Do you have any insights about how we can continue this conversation with people that in our circles, outside of this particular program, and how are you planning on doing that?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to acknowledge that I'm really angry at Patty right now, because when you asked her the question, she gave every detail that I would have wanted to share. And so I'm just going to amplify that. I'm literally, right. And then we kind of turn towards, as a would-be leader, or as a aspiring leader, we really need to turn the spotlight onto ourselves and go to work on ourselves. And one of the things that I did in the last 3 years, was focus on emotional intelligence, or really becoming cognizant of how I influence those things around me. And and there was also a side conversation about, and some of the things that you learn about yourself isn't particularly pretty. And if you're unwilling to open up, and take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, then you're not truly being an authentic leader. So that's kind of my thing is, be willing to go to work on yourself. Be willing to acknowledge that I may be part of my own problem, or the problem that's around me. And that doesn't make you a bad person. That just gives you the opportunity to go to work on those things that will make you truly effective. All effective leaders go through that process. And I think, save for another episode, is this conversation is kind of centered around leaders within organizations, which I think is powerfully important. But I think we also, as individuals, we're part of communities beyond that. Professional organizations, civic organizations, charitable organizations, and whatnot, and our influence and how we show up in those other circles, the Venn diagram of where we show up, I think it makes a greater contribution to the world that we inhabit, and I think that's important also.
Yes.
Everybody talks about Venn diagrams. Nobody ever talks about where and how. And that's my little joke for today. I don't. My brain just sometimes goes in unexpected directions, and I like to
say, Roy? You are
I
our
like to share with the world.
If not now, then.
If not now, then. Exactly so. That's too much of a set theory. Oh, anyway, I have enjoyed today being the interviewer and listening to this conversation, which I'm sure will continue in the future. And Daniel, thanks for hanging out with us. We're sorry that your connection is a little risky today, but we appreciate that you're here and you were contributing in the chat. And the core four, Patty Blackstaff, Simone Jo Moore, Greg Sanker, and moi. And thank
I
you.
must work on my wave.
You have to work on your wave. Yes,
Work on your wave. It's just
there you go. And Kathy Veldboom and Dee Burgoyne, thank you so much for being here with us today. And we'll see you on the other side of KTLO, keeping the learning on.